we have a bit of a deal between Patty Murray and Paul Ryan. This has to do, of course, with the fiscal year 2014 budget. Now, this deal is supposedly there to help ease some of the cuts from sequestration, as well as actually have a budget for 2014, which is a pretty good idea, especially since another round of sequestration cuts we're going to take place at the beginning of 2014. Now, this deal goes to avoid that. Now, under sequestration, of course, discretionary spending would have actually been capped at under $1 trillion, about $967 billion, which is kind of ironic, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But the current spending levels under this deal will be about $1.012 trillion for 2014 and $1.014 trillion for 2015. That's a lot of math and budget talk, not necessarily interesting, but you see that there is an increase in spending over what we would have had we left sequestration in effect. Now, the ironic part about all this is that it's kind of a win for Paul Ryan. Now, Paul Ryan, like I said, working on this with Patty Murray, he's supposedly the budget guru, and before this whole deal, we didn't really see a whole lot of him, which is kind of funny. You know, after the election, after he and Mitt Romney lost the election, he kind of disappeared for a while, and now he's back. And he's back in a sort of a big way, because this is sort of a big deal. Him working together with a Democrat to try and forge a bipartisan deal on the budget, and it seems that they're pretty successful. Now, of course, there's a lot of conservative groups that are obviously against the deal. A lot of your major conservative Tea Party groups are totally against this deal, obviously for stupid reasons. You know, we're not cutting enough. Now, the ironic part, going back to Paul Ryan, is this is a win for him because not only does it make him look bipartisan, but it also, and get this, it also cuts more spending than his original Ryan budget. You know, you remember the Paul Ryan budget that was too extreme during the election, made too many deep cuts. This has even more cuts, less spending than the Ryan bill. This is where we're at in our body politic now. This is where we're sitting, of where we can have a budget that's even less than the extreme Paul Ryan budget just a short year later. It's crazy how far we've gone, especially with sequestration. That was never even supposed to happen. When it comes to how much spending has been increased, well, who benefits? Well, obviously the defense contractors benefit greatly from this. It actually increases spending on defense by about $22 billion. That essentially erases the sequestration cuts from the Pentagon. Now, other programs, the non-defense discretionary programs, also seen a little bit of a bump, but it's not as much of a bump to really offset a lot of the deep cuts that we've made in non-defense discretionary programs. These cuts in these programs have hurt these programs a lot, such as Head Start, Meals on Wheels, homelessness assistance, Section 8 vouchers, you know, stuff that people actually need, as opposed to we got to make more bombs. That's our priorities here in America, making more bombs. Another particular part of this deal is how they achieved more spending. It's not because they raised taxes at all. No. They don't do that. We're not going to raise taxes. What are we going to do? We're actually going to raise fees. It's that old thing of, well, if we can't get revenue from the tax code, then we're going to find it from regular people. We're going to get it from everybody else. How do they do that? Well, first of all, let's look at the amount. $65 billion in additional revenue to ease the sequestration. Now, it comes from, the lion's share of this comes from higher security fees for air travelers. So, if you travel on an airplane, you're going to see higher fees on that stuff. Sorry, got to balance the budget. And another thing is where they get $8 billion from having federal workers actually pay higher premiums for their pensions. Yeah, you got to pay more. But one more thing, one more way that they raised revenue through this deal is the extension of the 2% cut to Medicare providers. Okay, so we're not going to pay Medicare providers as much, and we're going to save money. And it goes all the way to 2023, and they save, a pretty good chunk of money. And it does lower the deficit, and that is a good thing. But how you're doing it, that's really sort of the issue. And the issue that I have is that they're getting this deficit reduction through all the wrong places. I mean, this budget doesn't touch a lot of the important issues. It doesn't touch the Farm Bill. Doesn't touch SNAP. Doesn't even go into it at all. That's a separate thing. It also doesn't go into unemployment insurance. Now, a lot of people will say that unemployment extensions have gone on for too long. That we're just making a long-term safety hammock out of unemployment benefits. I disagree, because right now we still have more job seekers than there are open jobs. We've got 3 seekers for every 1 open job. And a lot of these people are hanging on to these, are just barely hanging on because of these benefits. And so now they're getting cut off because this bill doesn't even touch any of that stuff. So that's a really, really big problem. Another problem with this is that it just doesn't do anything to help people. It just doesn't do anything to help anybody that isn't a defense contractor. So not only that it doesn't help people, it actually goes and hurts people. Now, who does it hurt? Well, I mentioned earlier, it hurts the pensioners, the people that have to pay more into their federal pensions now. I mean, that's because they're an easy target. A lot of people aren't going to stick up for people with pensions in the public sector. Why? Well, it's because most normal people don't get a pension. And they look at that as, oh my God, look at those federal workers getting all those benefits on my dime. That's bullshit. That's bullshit to me. I don't like that at all. We got to get rid of that. That's a huge, huge problem. So how many people in the private sector get a pension? Funny you should ask. 18% of workers in the private sector get a pension, compared to the 78% of public workers that get a pension. So now you're kind of you got to look at that through the lens of a normal working person and say, well, those assholes are getting paid. Why don't I have something like that? And then you've got politicians that will go and say, look, it's those guys have it because they're taking it from you. They're taking your money and using it to live off of, live high off on the hog. Now, one thing about federal workers is that they've had their pay froze for the last 3 years. 2.2 million workers, federal workers, haven't seen a pay increase in the last 3 years. Now, a lot of people like to work for government because of the generous pay and the benefits. Now, it's making it so it's not so generous anymore. And that's really a big issue. And, John Earnhardt, principal at actuarial and consulting firm Milliman, actually reflects that in one of his statements. And he says, quote, their private sector counterparts will be jealous of the benefits they're maintaining. That's essentially it. And it's another example of the divide and conquer strategy of the class war. You get people that are jealous of other people, of their benefits, and it actually encourages people to want to try and take those benefits away from others because they don't get it. You see what I mean? But it's not the regular worker's fault. It's the politicians that are misleading them and the corporations that are denying them benefits in the first place. We've seen a lot of corporations dial back. Back in 1990, for example, 35% of workers, private workers, had pensions, had good benefits, had decent pay. But it's gone downhill from there because there are no longer decent jobs. The main thing that these corporations and these businesses say to these private, these public sector workers is, hey, you got benefits, don't complain. In fact, Lynn Dudley actually said, quote, federal workers have to be careful about crying foul over something of which the other solution would be to eliminate it. And that's the problem here. That's the problem. It's like they have, since they're the only ones with benefits, and by the way, it's because the power public sector unions, which Republicans are more than happy to try and get rid of. I think unions have their place. I don't think they're perfect, but they have their place in the workplace, right? And that's why we have them, to protect the workers. They say that, well, you shouldn't complain as a worker because we can take those benefits away. And a majority of the American public would actually be on the side of taking those away because it's because we don't have them. But they really need to direct their anger towards the companies and the corporations that don't give those benefits while maintaining an incredibly high profit margin. These large companies, these large corporations that are not creating jobs here in America, but that are creating jobs overseas and are not basically taking care of their workers the way that they should and giving them things like pensions and fair pay and vacation time. And that's a real big problem. It's just indicative of the class war divide and the direction that the Republicans want to take us. The right wing does not want people to have benefits, and they want people to blame government for them not having the benefits. And they want to blame government workers because the whole end game of this is privatization. And I know it sounds weird. Like, why would that be the end goal? Because they can make money off this. And it just goes along with the ideology of government can't do anything right. Yeah, if you break government, of course it's not going to do anything right. So, and if you break the government worker, and you're making what they're doing is that they're making it so government is not a good place to work anymore, so that more people won't. And they're trying to break down the public sector unions. They're trying to break down the pensions. And they're trying to make the American people blame the federal worker. Now, most people are actually have a favorable opinion. I did a poll a few weeks ago on that. But most people have a favorable opinion of government workers despite this. But don't think that the Republicans won't be trying to change that. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and share with your friends. If you want to see more, go to our channel at youtube.com/TYTNation. And if you really want to support the show, support this channel, go to our fundraising campaign at www.patreon.com/TYTNation. The website is in the description below. Thank you guys, and keep watching.